From Washington, D.C. to the heart of America, welcome to Mark Alford's America. I'm freshman Congressman from Missouri, Mark Alford, and I believe in America. I believe in you, and most importantly, I believe that our greatest days are still ahead. You know, each week we take you behind the scenes to share the stories, the news, legislation, and to meet the wonderful, great people who I have the honor of serving with in Congress, a lot of them helping shape our great nation. And today we're talking with Congressman and Dr. Greg Murphy. He proudly represents North Carolina's 3rd District. He's a practicing surgeon, medical missionary. He was first elected to Congress in 2019. Right now, he's on the House Ways and Means Committee, House Veterans Affairs Committee, Committee on House Administration. He's also a member of the Oversight Subcommittee there. And he serves as a co-chair of the House Republican Doctors Caucus. Please welcome to room 1516 in Longworth, Congressman Dr. Greg Murphy. Congressman, how's that for a minute?
It is fantastic. I hear the crowds are just screaming.
We need to dub in some applause for that, some cheers, maybe from Arrowhead Stadium. What made you want to be a doctor?
My father was a physician. He was a surgeon, and he died when I was young, but I still always had it in my brain, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps. You know, I like the old kind of medicine thing and trying to take care of folks, and it's really an admirable thing for progression for me. I never wanted to do anything else, really.
When you look at trying to cure people from illnesses, and then you look at Congress, how do you cure what ails us here?
There are some therapeutic poisons and chemotherapy and stuff. No, it's funny, Mark, because I come from a much different world as a surgeon, where we see a problem, we diagnose a problem, we figure out a pathway on how to treat it, we execute it, and we move on. And there's not a lot of fighting. There's not a lot of this, that, and the other stuff. There's always a second opinion available for folks. But medicine, and this is one thing, because I didn't go into politics on purpose. In the State House, one of our members resigned, and I got asked to fill his spot 7 years ago. And so I went from a world where we all doctors and patients work together. The enemy is the disease, right? The enemy is the illness. And it was a very, very different environment for me to come into in politics, where it's adversarial, where the enemy, per se, the adversary, is someone who disagrees with you about a particular topic. Usually is somebody across the aisle, but heck, now more and more so, it's within our own ranks. And so it's taken a while to have a little change in mindset. I wouldn't say it's complete change in mindset, because I'm still seeing myself much more as a doctor and surgeon than as a politician.
It doesn't have to be that way, though, here.
No, and I think I've been asked a lot about this recently, and I think the number one thing to blame is the 24/7 news cycle, because we have some, especially the extremists on both sides of the party, that love to hear themselves be heard, and the 24/7 news cycle wants that extra special soundbite. It likes that person to make an inflammatory statement. And we have some people that just literally come to Congress now to make inflammatory statements. And so I think it's really destroyed the collegiality in Congress. It's destroyed the ability that we're here working for the people we represent, rather than the individual who can show up in front of a camera. Now that there are how many stations, how many channels, how many news broadcasts, I think it's going to be very difficult to put the genie back in the bottle, especially with social media.
I just came up with a new term or slogan or mantra in the last couple of months. You can either be inspirational or you can be inflammatory, but you can't be both at the same
time. Sure,
absolutely.
Absolutely. We're seeing that by members in our own caucus these days.
You still practice medicine, right?
I do.
And you're a proctologist, right?
No, I'm a urologist.
Urologist.
I do surgery on the kidneys, bladder, prostate, take out kidney stones, a lot of cancer work.
So you've done the same surgery that was done on the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, right?
Yeah, I've done probably 1,000 prostatectomies, not so many as many of the particular type he had with the robot, but I've taken out probably over 1,000 prostates for cancer over the last 35 years.
I don't want to say dig into this. Let's talk about Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, because that's in the news right now.
Sure, absolutely.
Number one, I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I know there's a lot of upset people, including Chairman Rogers.
Yeah,
that
justifiably so.
Yeah, we were not notified. The President of the United States didn't even know that his Secretary of Defense, second in command for the military, had cancer, was in the ICU, was under anesthesia. That's unacceptable.
No, it's a serious, serious lack of judgment. And heck, I'll go back to the fact that he went along, even though supposedly disagreed with the President Biden in Afghanistan. I think this is kind of a continuation of lack of judgment. And I think there's been a lot of calls for his resignation. I think it's a perfect time for him to go off into the sunset. This doesn't show any type of judgment. And you have to question why. Why did he do this?
Was it pride, do you think?
Was it pride, or did he not trust his Assistant Secretary of Defense, who, by the way, was not his choice to be that? It was somebody that Biden picked. He wanted a woman in that position rather than necessarily the best qualified. Or did he just not trust Biden or anything? It was just an absolute lack of judgment. Hearing the word cancer, it can become first and foremost in your mind. But he's in a different spot. He is in a much different spot. And this was an absolute error.
When you say that, you mean it's not just about him and his family and his consideration,
Right.
His privacy rights. This guy is in second in command for our military.
Absolutely. He is the one who calls the shots. He has a Joint Chief of Staff above him, but he is the one who calls the shots on a day-to-day basis with what our entire military does. And it's inexcusable, personally, for him to show this type of judgment.
Some people may have thought that maybe he was trying to hide his diagnosis. He didn't want people to know. And I've heard others even today say, what a great opportunity, especially for an African-American man, where I think the rate of prostate cancer is twice that. Or
It's a much higher grade. It's a higher diagnosis.
But to use this as a platform to advocate for early detection.
Again, this opportunity. If he just been, how many other members of Congress have said that I'm treatment for this cancer or that cancer, or this is going on?
G.T. Thompson, the chair of our ag committee.
Absolutely. You're supposed to be transparent about this. And the fact he did this, one, he had to have a biopsy to determine that he had a cancer weeks before even the operation. And then to have the operation, not tell anybody. And, I can only think, from having taken care of so many patients with this, you have a catheter in your bladder afterwards to allow things to heal, that when they possibly took the catheter out, they didn't do a urine culture. They didn't do something like that. They didn't treat it with antibiotics and became what we call uroseptic. He had a bad urinary tract infection and became septic. That's how they ended up in the ICU.
And that's why he was in so much pain.
Yeah. Or maybe perhaps there are a lot of different things. Maybe he could not urinate and was obstructed. Lots of different things there.
Do we have a different attitude now in America about prostate issues? I know I get checked, but are we making advances in prostate treatment now for men?
Absolutely. Now, we went through a phase when the robot first came out 15 years ago or so, and I think we overtreated people with prostate cancer.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the company pushed the robot way too hard, and it got to the point where, hey, you thought you could have your prostate out one day and play 18 holes of golf the next day. It's absolutely not the case. So I think we've dialed it back a little bit. I think we're in a much better space and a smarter spot in the treatment of prostate cancer and the diagnosis of prostate cancer than we were 15 years ago. I have some issue with too many tests being done, genetic tests, this, that, and the other stuff, merely for factual information because it costs Medicare so much. But I think overall we are saving lives with PSA screening.
Let's delve into a little bit about Medicare issues. We know that we've got financial issues in America.
Sure.
We're taking in $5 trillion, they're spending $7.5 trillion.
Yeah.
Our discretionary spending is what we're trying to cut, but there are some so-called non-discretionary spending like Social Security and Medicare that eventually we're going to have to take a look at.
Absolutely.
So what do you think of the answers?
Mark, we're sitting here arguing about 15% of our budget and trying to change the trajectory. This is absolutely insane. 70% of our budget is mandatory spending on Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid. And if you look at what's happened with Medicare, in 1965, when President Johnson put that in, he said, well, at that point in time, we're going to cover everybody over 65. Life expectancy in 1965 was 70, 5 more years. And now in the ensuing 15 years, that life expectancy has moved from 70 up to 78, 80, with 2 or 3% of people living into their 90s. So there's been not only an explosion in the number of individuals who are on Medicare because they're living longer, but we're also, since 2010, have an explosion of the number of people on Medicare because that's when the baby boomers.
Right.
Okay, so not only are people living longer, Now there are more people coming into the system, and that extra 10 years of life, while it's wonderful, is exponentially more costly than it was in 1965 for that extra 5 years of life. And so the math just doesn't work these days. And so we're honestly going to have to look at things. If you look at life expectancy right now, and there was only 5 years, and you're up to now close to 80, those same numbers would make our life expectancy would move Medicare age up to 92. In some of those things, it's just crazy about how we would have to move Medicare up. So we're going to have to reform the system, or else it goes broke. It goes broke. It's simple math. And for the people who say, well, I paid into the system, that's right. You absolutely did. But in reality, you paid in $1 and you're receiving $4 in benefits. It's very simple. The math does not work. So we have to fix it.
We're going to dive into that a little bit more in detail. What might be some possible solutions? We'll also be talking about Biden's extreme climate agenda and more. We're talking with Congressman Greg Murphy, Dr. Murphy of North Carolina. You're listening to Mark Alford's America. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to Mark Alford's America, where each week we give you a behind-the-scenes look at Washington, let you meet some of the great folks helping shape our nation. Today we're talking with Congressman Dr. Greg Murphy. You're from North Carolina, right?
Absolutely. Grew up in Raleigh and have taken school a couple places different in the state.
Have you ever had Kansas City barbecue?
I've heard of it.
Well, I understand our barbecue is quite different than
it is. In fact, actually, I had to eat a little Kansas City barbecue after that Carolina-Kansas game last year. I still like our Eastern North Carolina barbecue. Now, there's Western North Carolina barbecue and Eastern North Carolina.
Explain that.
Vinegar-based in the East and ketchup-based in the
What do you prefer?
The East.
Okay.
Oh, there's not a doubt. Not a doubt. I even have a young employee who was baptized with Eastern North Carolina barbecue just a couple months ago, and it literally changed his life.
Sprinkled or immersed?
Immersed.
Immersed.
Full baptism.
Right. Full baptism.
Full baptism.
Well, if the Holy Spirit comes on him right now, we'll know why.
That's right.
Let's get back to Medicare.
Yeah.
What are the solutions then if we can't fund Medicare? And you said when we left off that when people paid in $1, now they're receiving $4 or $5 in benefits.
Yeah.
What's the solution?
This is a hard thing. And because everybody feels entitled in their benefits that they paid in, which they did. The problem was in 1965, Lyndon Johnson's Democrats did not do the math. They did not do the math. They made people feel better about themselves right then, but they did not do the math in a growing aging population, making understanding that there would be improvements in medicine. People would live longer. So it's a revenue problem that we're not taking enough in. Here's another scary statistic. In 1965, for each recipient of Medicare, there were 4.5 people paying in for that one person, okay? Now, because we have the baby boomers coming along, our younger folks are not having as many babies. And that number from 4.5 is now turned to a little more than 2.8. So you have fewer people paying in. So the pyramid has actually flipped upside down. That's the number paying into the system. Again, people are living longer. More and more people are taking from the system. So again, the math does not work. And it's going to have to work to make it work. We're going to have to do something with the revenue side. We're going to have to do something with the eligibility age and possibly even an eligibility limit on income. So sorry, guys, but I think people who are worth $100 million don't need to be, getting out of the system. Those are very small numbers of those individuals, but we have to do something to fix this situation. It has to be.
What can be done on the revenue side?
Well, there's certain points about taxes that may need to be changed about how people can get into the system. Hospital Medicare A is paid by payroll taxes. B is paid by something different. It's kind of a complex kind of thing. It's going to take a lot of diving into, but we're going to have to, as a nation, understand that these numbers don't work anymore. The Democratic Party in 1965 did not plan for any of this. And so we have to be fortified to actually make the fixes to make it happen.
What about Social Security?
Same things happened with Social Security. I mean, it was begun before Medicare was begun. Mm-hmm. But again, the numbers paying in and some of the payroll taxes, our Social Security tax, we got fewer people paying in. And absolutely, when people say, well, I paid into the system, I should pay out. Yes, absolutely, number one. But two, the system you paid into when you were 35 is not the system that we have now at age 65. So your life expectancy when you were 35 or when you were younger compared to what your life expectancy now that you're 65, if you had been 60, the age when you were 33, the life expectancy if you were 65 compared to if you're 65 and your life expectancy are now two different things. It's having longer trajectory periods, longer pay periods. We have to do something with the formula. It has to be changed.
We're even seeing politicians like presidential candidate Nikki Haley now even talking about to young people that possibly delaying
Benefits.
benefits.
I mean, we have to think about that.
But that's almost a death sentence if you're running for,
Well, you know what?
particularly Congress.
Here is what we get wrong in politics. And this is where, good, bad, or indifferent, Mark, if I say the bad thing and I go back to being a lowly surgeon, then so be it. I'm just going to say the truth. You have to tell the truth to people. It's kind of like being the adult in the room. And this is where sometimes I get upset with one of my Democratic colleagues. They want to base on policy on things that make people feel better, but they don't think about the consequences. And this is what's happened with Social Security, and this is what's happened with Medicare. They didn't think about the consequences on how to pay for things. So that's where we are. And, Nikki Haley, I think the world of her. I think she's speaking the truth. It's the hard facts that people need to hear.
Speaking of money and what people need to hear, people have been hearing a lot about electric vehicles. I call them battery-powered vehicles, but they are charged through electricity. And Biden's really extreme climate agenda, I call it a climate cult, that they have sold the American people, or at least tried to, a bill of goods on the issues that they see wrong with the climate. And one of those solutions is mandating EVs for the American people. Why is that not a sustainable avenue for transportation?
But, it's funny. If we live in the free market economy in a democracy in the United States, people have choice. And that's what's driven our country since day one. If you want to go to North Korea, you want to go to China, you go to the Soviet Union, where the government tells you what to do, then fine, mandate the electronic vehicles, which is what Biden is trying to do. He's trying to take, in a democracy, an authoritarian rule of a socialistic or communistic country. Just doesn't work. And we found that out right now. What is it? 3,000 auto dealers wrote, and the president said, look, these aren't selling. You can pour them on our lots. They're just not selling. And here's the great fallacy, Mark. We can have the debate about the climate all day. Personally, I do think we are going through a period of change. I think it's very evident. I think the science dictates that. Whether we can change it is absolutely anybody's ill. And changing everything in the world, if we reduce fossil fuels to zero by 2030, what would we do? The estimates are we would change the temperature by the end of the century 0.08 degrees. That's nothing. It's very negligible. I believe so much more of the climate discussion needs to be about adaptation. I believe it should be much more about adaptation. How do we adapt to a changing environment? How do we make our plants more resistant to drought? How do we help unclog our riverways so that when floods occur, there's not flooding on businesses and homes and everything? How do we adapt? We can sit around, and this is what some of our left progressive crazies do, and run around with their heads on fire screaming. That's not going to change anything. And you're also going to scare the younger generation. There's climate anxiety in our younger youth now. You're going to scare them to death. And no offense to little Greta, I can't remember her last name. She's not a scientist. She's an alarmist. She's one who screams. This is not what we need. We need science. We need how we're going to actually adapt to this and help ameliorate changes as they move forward. We are not going to stop the earth from revolving. We're not going to flip the poles of the earth. God forbid that happens when we're alive. We need to learn how to adapt to a changing environment. That's what humans do.
Especially when China and India are the biggest offenders when it comes to pollutants.
Yeah, the crazy thing is we ask for solar panels, we ask for batteries, we ask for wind turbines from China, okay? Guess what China does to provide those resources to make us feel better about ourselves? They put 2 new coal plants, dirty coal plants, online a week. The Paris Climate Accord allowed China to go through and through and make it dirtier and dirtier, but we're to feel better about ourselves. I have just a little, news flash for our left progressive climate folks. The air travels fully around the world. It doesn't stay in just one place.
Doctor, thank you so much. Hey, thanks for joining us for Mark Alford's America. We'll talk again next week. Until then, folks, remember, I believe in you. I believe that our best days are still ahead of us. Dr. Murphy, I believe in America. Have a great weekend, everyone. God bless. We'll see you back here next week.